Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Operation Gladio Meets Secret Society with WarHamster Bady. How are you today, Brady?
I am wonderful. I am getting sick and tired that it is still in the 40s in May, but besides the weather, everything is great.
Okay, I am not going to tell you it's supposed to be like 90 here today.
Yeah, I've actually have my heater on right now, which I thought I would. It's
I'm sorry.
well.
That's awful.
Hey, I chose to live here. Of course, I didn't think I thought I'd be gone by now, but life gets in the way. Well, we got another fun episode of our usual topic today, where we talk about secret societies, meet Operation Gladio, and all the insidious connections. And of course, today we're going to get started again with some more Skull and Bones alumni. And we are in the 1960s. And given the overview for people who are new to the show, Skull and Bones is a secret society at Yale University. They tap 15 juniors every year to join this secret, perhaps cult. And somehow, this small little group of people, since 1834, find themselves in the most influential corners of power in the United States and foreign governments. They find themselves as business leaders, heads of Secretary of Commerce, CIA, important military positions, very much in academia. And I'm not saying there's a conspiracy here, but there are so many darn connections that you can draw that conclusion anytime you want, and I'm not going to argue. So, with no further ado, our first bone, I didn't get any pictures today, so I apologize. We're not going to have any photo ops. First gentleman we're looking at today is a guy by the name of David Rumsey, and he is a Skull and Bones class of 1966. Now, all at the same time in 1966, it's important to remember you had some other very prominent people in Skull and Bones, including John Kerry and, of course, George W. Bush, who was class of 65 and 68, respectively. So these guys are all classmates of two guys who ran for president against each other. What are the odds that two presidential candidates come from the same college, same secret society?
You got to have both sides of every coin.
Uh-huh. So Mr. Rumsey, why is he notable? He got his Bachelor of Arts and his Master of Fine Arts from Yale. Okay. He's also a founding member of what's called Yale Research Associates. Grew up nearby in a place called Lakeville, Connecticut, and his family, as many of these are, have very deep, old American founding ties. So, would you be shocked if I told you that he attended a private boarding school?
No.
Yeah, just like all these guys. Let's take a picture. He went to this place called the Hotchkiss School. So we're going to talk about the Hotchkiss School a little bit. And we'll just take a look at. This is the Hotchkiss School.
Okay.
Unique educational opportunities. College advising. 614 students. They brag. They have 42% students of color, 14% international. And these are all the college's feeder schools they go to. Do we have any interesting people on their board of directors? I'm not sure if I have that here.
You know, I just asked Grok if David Rumsey is related to the Rumseys that Bill Donovan married into in Buffalo. And he said that he can't find an actual genealogy source, but there are a lot of overlaps. For example, there was an article that was written that said David Rumsey actually was a resident of Buffalo, New York. So that's very, very interesting.
Wouldn't shock me. Of course, very little does these days.
Correct.
Students, alumni. Oh, we got the alumni elsewhere. I don't have the board of directors or anything, so it's a pretty good looking school. So let's talk about this Hotchkiss School. Well, first of all, it is one of the, there's a couple of Where do I have this? Hang on. Hotchkiss School is founded in 1891 by a Maria Hotchkiss, and she's the heir to her late husband Benjamin Hotchkiss's fortune. Benjamin's an interesting guy. He made his money as an ordnance engineer. In the 1800s, he worked as a gun maker on Colt revolvers and Winchester rifles. He then goes on to patent a line of projectiles for rifled artillery that was used extensively in the Civil War. So this is guy was he's a war profiteer, making very deadly weapons. After the Civil War, he moves to France and he developed what's called the Hotchkiss gun, which is a cannon revolver they used on ships in France, and America used it too. And that was they developed the machine gun that was used by American and French troops in World War I. Mr. Hotchkiss was also a polygamist. He had a French wife without ever getting a divorce to Maria. Then he passed away, and and Maria inherited the rest of the fortune. So she decided to found a school. She was an educator herself. Her top advisor was the guy who was the president of Yale at the time by the name of Timothy Dwight. So we're in 1891, and Dwight wanted this Hotchkiss school to be a feeder school for Yale. So they hire a bunch of key staff from the Phillips Academy at Andover, which we talked about a few weeks ago.
Okay.
All right. So I found a list. This is one of the Hotchkiss School is one of these 8 schools that are called the 8 Schools Association. And it's also a member of the 10 Schools Admission Organization. And I think it's worth looking at the schools that are on this. So let me find that real quick. All right. Let's do a quick screen share.
And people just think that they've captured the education system now.
It's been that way for a very long time. All right, here are the 8 Schools Association. It says it is a group of large private college preparatory boarding schools in the northeastern United States. Yankees. It was formally established in 2006, but has existed in some form since '73. Let's just take a look at the schools. Oh, we've got Choate Rosemary Hall in Connecticut. Deerfield Academy, we're going to have to spend some time on. It's got one of the biggest net assets, about over $1 billion.
Wow.
Hotchkiss School. Lawrence School. Yeah, Hotchkiss only has $665 million in assets. We've got the Northfield Mount Hermon School. Oh, Phillips Academy of Andover and Phillips Academy of Exeter and the St. Paul School, all of which we have looked into. So nice little small list.
Wow.
And there's this other list of 10 schools, a bunch of the same names, with a little bit of crossover. The Hill School gets added, and Loomis Chaffee School. We've talked about Chaffee before, right?
Right.
Yeah, well, Loomis is also a big name in asset management. Something we'll hit on it later. Oh, and here at the bottom, we've got the Taft School. Obviously named after William Howard Taft, with a long line of Skull and Bones alumni. Any patterns?
A couple.
All right. So like I said, it's got about 600 students. So let's talk about their famous alumni. No particular order. I've got an Alfred Whitney Griswold. There's that Whitney name again, one of the oldest American families. He was Hotchkiss class of 1924, and he became the president of Yale University.
Of course he did.
How about Jonathan Bush, class of 1949, George H.W. Bush's brother? Oh, they got another brother, William H.T. Bush. He went there, class of 1956.
Oh, my gosh.
All right. Now we've got the Ford family, all of whom would go on to become executives of the Ford Motor Company. Edsel Ford, 1958. Henry Ford II, 1936. William Clay Ford Sr., 1943. William Clay Ford Jr., 1975. All went to this high school. Kind of interesting. You've got the Bush family that was involved with financing the Nazis. You've got the Ford family that was involved with financing the Nazis. All of their kids going to the same prep school. I'll just let that hang there for a second.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Uh-huh. And back then, they only had about 300 students. Here's a name we've run into before. A guy by the name of Britton Haddon, class of 1915. He was a bonesman. Another guy, why do we know him? Because the class of 1916 was Henry Luce. These are the two guys that co-founded Time magazine. Britton Haddon died at 31 years old, and Luce took credit for everything Haddon ever wrote. We talked about this previously, but they thought this is the school that those two came from.
Yeah, and associated Time Life with the CIA.
Mm-hmm. And of course, how many times did Time magazine feature Adolf Hitler on the cover, if we're going to keep going with that theme?
Correct.
Okay. Next name I have here is Robert Lehman, class of 1908. He went to Yale, but was not in Skull and Bones because he was Jewish and wasn't allowed to. He's famous because he's the grandson of the founder of Lehman Brothers, the company that would go bankrupt in 2008 during the financial crisis.
And his name comes up a lot in association with financing a lot of the background information of Europe as well.
Mayor Sarge put in chat that the Hotchkiss gun is one of the U.S.'s biggest pieces of weapons list. On the U.S. biggest. That's good to know. But his wife made a good school, apparently. All right, here's a name that I knew popped up. Raymond McGuire, who's class of 75. He was the former head of my former employer, Citigroup's investment banking division. So I've never met the man, but I definitely knew who he was. Here's another family. Remember Mars Incorporated?
The candy bars?
Oh, yeah. Two of their sons, Forrest Mars Jr. and John Mars, attended in 49 and 53. They both go on to be executives for their parents' company. A lot of incestuousness in these corporations. We've got Harold Stanley, who we've talked about many times. Class of 1904, was one of the founders of Morgan Stanley with J.P. Morgan. And of course, Harold Stanley was a Skull and Bones. You're getting a lot of bonesmen out of this private grooming school, aren't you?
Yes, a lot.
There's more, believe it or not. I got a Victor Ashe, class of 1963. Now, you might remember that name. He was also went to the Groton School before he transferred to Hotchkiss. But he was the mayor of Knoxville, Tennessee, and became the ambassador to Poland from 2004 to 2009 from a mayor of Tennessee. So it had to have been the connections, and obviously it's his high school and the fact that, Victor Ashe was a bonesman. Another one.
Interesting. And he was the ambassador to Poland when?
2004 to 2009 under Bush. So it's a Bush connection. So
he was in Poland right after the first overthrow of Ukraine in 2004.
Indeed.
I'm sure it's just a coincidence that he was right next door where they were launching operations from, but go on.
No, very good catch there. And again, his only connection. Yeah, you're going to see so many of these ambassadors have their connections to Bush either through boarding schools or through Skull and Bones or through Yale itself. But basically, it was a very small club running American foreign policies under Bush. Next name I have. Oh, here's a fun one. Donald Easum, E-A-S-U-M. He's a Hotchkiss class of 1942, and he was the U.S. ambassador in the 1960s and 70s, but I'll get to that in a second. He went to the University of London on a Fulbright scholarship, and that needs to go on our list of things to investigate when we start talking. Go ahead.
Well, I've looked into the Fulbright because it's basically the same thing as the Oxford thing as far as grooming people for the CIA.
Yeah. Okay.
And the State Department.
Yeah, I knew I had a exclamation point on that for a reason.
Yeah.
You ever heard of the Doherty Foundation and the Penfield Fellowship?
I've heard of the Doherty one.
He does. This guy Easum also studied in Buenos Aires on a Doherty Foundation grant and a Penfield Fellowship. So those are two more to look into. I didn't get a chance
Huh.
to. This,
That's
but it's like
interesting.
yeah, it's like the Rhodes Scholarship.
Yeah.
So this guy had quite a diplomatic career. He served in the following countries. This is the 1960s and 70s. He was in Nicaragua, Indonesia, Senegal, Gambia, Guinea-Bissau, Niger, and the Upper Volta.
Coup, 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 coup.
I am sure that's just a coincidence.
I'm sure too. Oh, I'm reading ahead. Go ahead. He was in the USAID?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
No wonder they're so
USAID. Uh-huh. Oh, he's also a senior fellow at Yale's Stimson Seminar from 1998 to 2004. Who is the Stimson Seminar named after? Henry Stimson? Yes. Who is also,
Yes.
what secret society was Stimson a member of? Skull and Bones.
I don't know. What was it? The pirate one? Holy crap.
And you're not going to be shocked to know that he was a member of the Council of Foreign Relations.
I would not at all.
Well, he was. In fact, you'd be shocked if he wasn't at this point.
Holy moly.
All right, we're not even done with this high school yet, this boarding school. We've got a George McMurdy Godley, Hotchkiss class of 1935, and he is a U.S. diplomat also. Went to Yale, but was not in the Skull and Bones. He was the ambassador to Congo from 1964 to 66. Anything happening in Congo?
That was right after they couped him in. They
63.
assassinated Lumumba on January 17th, 1961. They installed the dictator Mobutu, and they were basically stealing everything from the Congo during the time he was the ambassador.
Nice job if you can get it. So he leaves the
Where
Congo.
else?
Oh, where else?
Go ahead.
Oh, he becomes the ambassador to Laos, 1969 to 1973.
And what were we doing then? Running drugs? Yes, exactly
CIA,
what we were doing.
But we weren't involved in Laos, were we? CIA sure as hell was.
Yeah, I've written about Godley before.
Yeah, he's the guy who had to testify in Congress in 1992 about the POWs. He was criticized for leaving Americans behind, like 135.
Yeah.
And they made movies about him. That's the guy.
Holy shit.
So interestingly, when he got nominated to the Council of Foreign Relations, he got rejected by the Senate because J. William Fulbright opposed because he was too closely associated to failed American policies in Asia. So
he was nominated not to the CFR. I think you mistakenly said that. He was nominated for the Secretary of State for East Asia, right?
I may have gotten that wrong, but yeah, he got a nomination. He got his nomination shut down, and maybe he was in the CFR. Maybe I got it. Maybe I read it wrong.
Yeah.
Interesting career he had.
Holy moly.
Yeah. Of course, now we've got Winston Lord, who we've talked about the Lord family many times. One of the oldest families in America, 1955 class of Hotchkiss class. He was a bonesman, and as a reminder, Winston Lord became the U.S. ambassador to China. Okay, the next name I have is a Clark Rant Jr., class of 1966. Oh, he was also the U.S. ambassador to China from 2001 to 2009. Two ambassadors to China from the same boarding school. Remind me, who was the gatekeeper to when we opened up China in the 1970s? Would that have been the Bush family?
Yeah.
Yes, it was.
With Kissinger. Yeah.
Uh-huh. And now we got two ambassadors to China coming from the same boarding school.
That's crazy.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to this pattern. So Rant Jr., Went to Yale, was not in Skull and Bones. He lived in Hong Kong for about 18 years, and that's how he became the U.S. expert on China. And he is currently the advisor to a private equity fund. We'll be talking more about private equity today. Common theme. It's called Hopu Investment Management. It is a Chinese private equity fund, and he is one of their advisors. I mean, he makes a lot of money.
Oh, wait a minute. It says here that he served in the U.S. Air Force Security Service. So he was intel.
Is that what U.S. Air Force Security Service would be?
Well, yes, that's what it is.
Excellent. All right, next name I have here is someone we've talked about before, Mr. Strobe Talbot, lifetime friend of Bill Clinton. And I believe Bonesman as well, right?
I think so. Yeah, he was Yale. Oh, and he's an Oxford and Rhodes Scholar too.
Yeah, he was a Rhodes Scholar with Clinton at the same time.
Yeah, wow.
So we've already talked about Talbot, but he's in there too. Next name I have is a Paul Warnke, Warnke. He was the U.S. Secretary of Defense for International Security Affairs.
Okay, and let me tell everybody what that is. That's the CIA conduit into the Department of Defense.
Mm-hmm. Guess where he went to college?
Yale?
Yes, he was not in the Bonesman, though. Not all of them do get to be. World War II, he served in the Coast Guard. Then he comes back and goes to Columbia Law School and joins a firm by the name of Covington and Burling.
Okay.
Yeah, guess who's running Covington and Burling at the time?
Dean Atkinson?
You got it. None other than Dean Atkinson.
Atkinson. We were just talking about him, weren't we?
Uh-huh. And we talked about Covington and Burling. And
yes.
I believe they're in the news right now. That is where Obama's former attorney general is currently working, and a lot of the other alumni of the Obama administration.
And he was Robert McNamara's legal counsel when he was the SecDef during Vietnam.
Yeah, he was the general counsel of the SecDef in '67. He was actually had some pretty good positions. He opposed expansion of the Vietnam War, and when Clark Clifford became the new SecDef, he was one of the top civilian leaders trying to educate Clifford about, look, we might want to pursue peace here. That's not working out militarily. So he was on the right side of history on that one.
And who was Clark Clifford again? Wasn't he the guy that was illegally involved in BCCI?
God, there's such a small circle these people run in.
So he's money laundering for the CIA. Yeah, no big deal.
All right, so Warnke also was the counsel for the Secretary of Defense in 1967 when the USS Liberty was fired upon by the Israeli Air Force. And his quote.
Go ahead.
Here's his quote. I found it hard to believe that it was, in fact, an honest mistake on the part of Israeli Air Force units.
But it was McNamara that hid all of that. And you cannot tell me he hid all of that with his general counsel not knowing it. That's the lead legal advisor to McNamara. He would have been sitting right next to him.
Interesting, huh?
Yeah.
Okay, who else do we have here? A little bit more on him. Because he wasn't done by any stretch after the Liberty. He was also the chief SALT negotiator for Carter in '77, I think it was. And then, of course, he was a writer for the Council of Foreign Relations Foreign Policy magazine. And he wrote the famous Apes on a Treadmill article, which basically talked about the futility of the nuclear arms buildup. And so he's actually on the right side of a number of things in history. But as you just pointed out, he sure as heck knew what the other people who were on the wrong side of history were doing.
Yeah.
All right, next name we have is a Charles Yost, class of 1956, he became the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations. He was Princeton educated, not Yale. And he also went to, we've heard this one before, the French school called École des Hautes Études Internationales. My French is getting better. I practiced that one, which is basically international studies. So, of course, he leaves.
Go ahead.
No, jump in, please.
Well, I'm sure you're going to cover where he was the ambassador. I'll have a couple of things to say about that.
Yeah. Well, he joins the U.S. Foreign Service in 1930. He worked on the United Nations Charter when it was being drafted in 1944. And then he became a writer for the Council of Foreign Relations, of all places. And where else did you want to mention he was posted?
Well, he was in Morocco during the time of Eisenhower's administration, which is where they were launching a lot of their North African operations out of, because Morocco was basically a colony of Britain for all intents and purposes. And it just happens to be co-located with all of the activity that was going on in North Africa during that time, like in Algiers and stuff like that. So that's a really big deal. Then he moves on, it looks like only to Syria for a month before he's moved on. He also was the ambassador to Laos in the 50s, which is when we were first going in there. And ends up, he was also for a little bit of time the ambassador to Thailand right after the Second World War, which is interesting because Thailand was the hotbed of operations at that time for the setting up of Chiang Kai-shek, who eventually ends up in Thailand, because they were trying to figure out where to put him. And Thailand was kind of one of their staging bases.
Indeed.
So he's been in the mix of everything.
Amazing amount of diplomats and some of the craziest places, all from the same boarding schools. Okay, we got some people in the judiciary that are worth mentioning. Robert Bork, who of course got borked. He was a Reagan nominee. Was a Reagan nominee for Supreme Court that got shot down. I believe it was Joe Biden led that attack on Bork.
Yep.
And it's too bad. I think Bork would have been a very good Supreme Court justice. He probably would have been one of the more conservative ones we see. But
well,
that did not happen.
Him if he wasn't.
Say again?
They wouldn't have attacked him if he wasn't.
No. That's that's when Kavanaugh was up, they tried to bork him as well. It was ridiculous. Somehow he got through. Say what you want about Mitch McConnell, but at least he got the judges through. We also have Potter Stewart, who did become on the Supreme Court. We've talked about him before because he was an alumni of Skull and Bones, one of four, I think there's 5 different Supreme Court members that have affiliations to Skull and Bones. And Potter's interesting because his father was the mayor of Cincinnati, Ohio, where we've... Yeah.
That's funny.
I've got a number of military high-ranking guys. I didn't grab all of them, but they've got a Thaddeus Beale, who was the Undersecretary of the Army. You got a Douglas Campbell, who apparently was the first American flying ace. Got an Artemus Gates, who was the Undersecretary of the Navy, and a bit of a war hero. You had a Paul Nitze, who was the Secretary of the Navy. You had an Elliot Strauss, who was a Rear Admiral and a key Allied staff officer for the Normandy invasion. A lot of military brass from one school.
Paul Nitze, I don't, was he actually in the military or did he just serve because he's very interesting. His name comes up in so much of the back end of everything that was happening during that time. Because remember yesterday we were talking about him because he was involved with the Dillon Reed law investment bank. He comes up in he was very close friends with everybody at Standard Oil. He was basically like tied at the hip with George Kennan. And it says here his brother-in-law founded the Aspen Institute. So
yeah, I just put down that he was Secretary of the Navy, but yeah, you can dive deeper on a lot of these guys.
yeah, yeah.
Last name on the alumni that I wanted to talk about was, of course, Porter Goss.
Oh my God, not him too. Holy
Uh-huh.
shit.
Class in 1956, he would be the last DCI and the first director of the Central Intelligence Agency.
Oh,
Porter Goss, yeah, he was a fraternity brother of William H.T. Bush, who's the uncle of George W. Bush. And he was also a fraternity brother of John Neogroponte, who was also in the fraternity, and Neogroponte would become Bush's DNI. So all of these guys have known each other since high school, become the brain trust of our intelligence division under Bush.
Can I say a few things about Goss?
Sure. I mean, there's more. I've got more. If you can jump in whenever.
Go ahead.
All right. So he gets recruited by the CIA while he's a junior in college, and that's public record. He would work for the Directorate of Operations in Latin America, the Caribbean, and then Europe.
Coo.
Yeah, he did wet work. There's no doubt about that. He was in Miami during the Cuban Missile Crisis, stationed in Miami. So he's part of that. Gets out of the CIA and decides to run for Congress from Florida. And he was there from 1997 to 2004. And he sat as the chair of the House Intelligence Committee for 8 years.
Now I'm going to push back a little bit because I don't think he got out of the CIA.
Fine. We've talked about, we just recently talked about when we did Jake Sullivan, all the different spooks that are running for Congress.
Yes.
He's one of them.
Yes.
And of course, he was a member of the Council of Foreign Relations, or is a member.
And if I remember correctly, when he went into Congress, there was something to the fact of when he ran for Congress. There was like someone had left to make an opening for him.
Yeah, his predecessor had left, and yeah, I don't have. I've read over the details. I forget the guy's name, but it was
it was like a special election. So they were basically putting him in Congress.
Yeah. You know where his district was in Florida?
In the Fort Myers, Naples area. I remember that from when I researched him. Down in the southwest corner of Florida.
Well, that, ladies and gentlemen, is the Hotchkiss School.
Okay, hold on. I got a couple of things I want to tell people about Goss, because every time I get a chance to talk about him, I talk about him. Because not only was he in Congress, he was in Congress over 9/11. He was the guy that set up the Patriot Act. He is the guy that was part of the drafting of the Patriot Act before 9/11. This is one of the guys that was in part of the planning of 9/11 and had the Patriot Act ready to go the day after 9/11. So I want everybody to understand this. This is a career CIA officer who went around assassinating people, who was placed in Congress just prior to 9/11, was there when 9/11 happened, and is the guy that sponsored the Patriot Act that had already been written. Okay.
And he just happens to have longtime Bush family connections.
Just so happens. Okay, now you can go on.
And then Bush would make him the, like I said, the director of the CIA.
Yes, that was his reward.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, that is your Hotchkiss School.
That's crazy.
Yeah, I'd say that's every bit as juicy as the Andover or the Groton School or any of the other ones we've covered.
I actually want to say that one's better.
It might be.
Oh, and this one guy I noticed on here, Frederick Vanderbilt Field. I only mentioned him because I recognize that name, and the Institute of Pacific Relations is a CIA front, and he basically was there. So it is a big deal. He's a big deal too. I've ran across his name a couple of times. He also, it says that his organization, the Pacific organization, was funded by none other than Carnegie and Rockefeller, which I found in my research already.
Small circle.
Yeah. Holy crap. This is crazy. And not to mention, they had a whole bunch of uh, people in literature journalism that obviously we don't have time. Oh, but there's a Loeb, William Loeb, Loeb, a whole bunch in not a whole bunch in medicine, but they've got the entire field of operations covered. They've got someone everywhere. So that's critically important. Their entertainment list is very interesting too. We don't have time to go through it, but just understand that they have someone everywhere.
They all know each other.
Yep.
All right, getting back to David Rumsey. There's a little bit more about him than just where he went to high school. He made his money as a real estate developer, and he was then he would join Charles Feeney's company called the General Atlantic Holding Company of New York. This is a private equity firm that manages $103 billion in assets under management. It's the 9th biggest private equity firm in the world. Growth equity firm is someone who provides capital and strategic support for global growth companies. In my professional career, the last decade, I specialized in managing money for high net worth people. I was the portfolio manager of a private family office. We did a lot of work with private equity. And I'm telling you right now that, people may be rewarded with the stock market. The smart money isn't publicly traded companies, it's in private. This company itself, as of 2013, it's the most recent data I have, at internal rate of return called an IRR of 24% annualized. And that stomps the stock market.
So can I also say that these are the places, the primary two places that the CIA launders money: real estate and in private equity.
Yeah, did you know that the National Association of Realtors has successfully lobbied for decades to make sure that the NAR, National Association of Realtors, does not have to follow Know Your Customer rules? Meaning drug money, cartel money comes up to Florida and buys real estate to launder it. And the NAR lobbies to keep it that way.
And they buy it with cash. That's how they launder it.
Yeah. So the initial CEO of this General Atlantic Holding Company was a guy by the name of Steve Denning. And he came from McKinsey and Company. So, and that's, yeah, talk about connected, tying politics to business. Yes. Let's look at some of their biggest holdings over the years. How about United Health Services? Stock's down over 50% in the last month. Royalty Pharma is a recent IPO they did in 2020, right before COVID. Yeah. Hey, we got a Rumble rant or $10 funding.
Oh, cool.
Thank you, Fergie62.
Oh, Fergie's my buddy.
They were early investor in a company called JIO Platforms. That's an Indian digital services giant. They're an early investor into ByteDance, which is TikTok's parent company. And of course, I couldn't leave off the list. They were the early investor of CrowdStrike.
Oh my gosh. Are you kidding
Colonel,
me?
who is CrowdStrike? The FBI connected company, supposed to be cyber intelligence firm that accredited Russia to the hack of the DNC, even though there was no evidence of it.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, well,
That's
there's your
crazy.
early investor. Okay, so this company is founded in 1980 by Charles Feeney. Who's Charles Feeney? Well, he was the co-founder of Duty Free Shoppers Limited. You go to the airport and you see duty free, that's Feeney. And he was basically a travel retailer for Hong Kong luxury products. Feeney's worth looking into. Going off on a little bit of a tangent. He went to Cornell University and was a member of a secret society called the Sphinx Head Society.
Oh, I've heard of that one.
Yeah, they are described as similar to Skull and Bones. Cornell's co-founder and the first president of the university was a guy named Andrew Dixon, who was a bonesman. So there is some connection there. They built their clubhouse in 1926 to resemble an Egyptian tomb. Now, we ask about the tomb at Skull and Bones on Yale's campus, and then you see the connection between Columbia and the Egyptian tomb, and you wonder there's got to be some kind of connection there, right?
Right.
Sphinx Head doesn't seem to be as prominent as Skull and Bones is. And the only really famous alumni, they tap 40 seniors every year. And the only very short list of famous alumni, the Tata Sons chair, Ratan Tata, David Scorton, who's the president of Cornell, Adolph Coors Jr. and Peter Coors of the Coors beer family. Found Kenneth Derr, who's the CEO of Chevron, Oscar Mayer Jr. from Oscar Mayer Wieners, and Neil Becker from the Council of Foreign Relations. And that's about all I had on their famous alumni.
So hold on just a second. The Coors family is the one that was co-funding some of the CIA clandestine operations. So I think what you may have stumbled upon, and I'll have to go back and look, there's tiers to this, right? Obviously, Skull and Bones is, I think you may have just stumbled upon because, so understand that you've got all of these people up here that's going to be in the hundreds of billions of dollars and in the government, but you have to have your next tier down of the CEOs that are basically operating and funding these things behind the scenes, because they're the ones that ultimately get rich too. The oligarchs, the CEOs running these international corporations. So I'll have to take a look into that. I've heard it, but I have not done any research into it.
Yeah, if there's something there, we'll do it. But I think you picked up on exactly what I was suggesting, and that's that there are secret societies and then there are secret societies.
Yes.
And like I've always said, what better place to hide a secret society than within another secret society? I talk about that with the Freemasonry. So yeah, there are different hierarchies going on here.
Yeah.
But Feeney's very well connected, obviously. He was a big funder of Sinn Féin, which is the far left Irish political party that was closely connected to the IRA. In fact, Feeney would fund the Sinn Féin party in Washington, D.C. after the IRA had their ceasefire with the British government.
That's interesting because the IRA, I have discovered through multiple sources, was basically a stay-behind capability for Britain to instigate terror and turmoil anytime they needed it.
Yeah, it's interesting. I am half Irish, so I've read quite a bit about the IRA and the troubles in Ireland. I'm not sure with the versions I read when I was a teenager are as accurate as they probably needed to be. But this guy's also a very well-known philanthropist. He associated with far left causes. He's done a lot of investment with Bill Gates and Warren Buffett. That's who this guy is. And that's who our guy, forgot the name of our bonesman. Oh, Rumsey. That's who Rumsey's with. Yeah. What else there to know about this guy? Oh, his big charity is called Atlantic Philanthropies. Thank you. It's based in Bermuda. tax haven. Yeah. Remember how we talk about how these tax-free foundations are one of the biggest scams ever pulled on the taxpayer public?
Yeah.
This guy has his philanthropy in Bermuda. A lot of what he calls philanthropy is political donations. In fact, he made $27 million of donations, basically lobbyists, to get the passage of the Affordable Care Act under Obama. And over half of their donations from this philanthropy goes to lobbying. It is basically a political slush fund that this guy is running under the guise of being a charity or a philanthropy. Ladies and gentlemen, that is how they make the hot dogs in DC. All right, so Rumsey, very successful guy, leaves business to pursue his passion of cartography. And I got to share this with you because he donated a huge map collection to Stanford University, of all places.
Of course
But
he did.
this I have to share because this is one of the neatest websites in the world. So people, if you want to know where to find great maps, you go to davidrumsey.com, and this guy collected maps from everywhere. Let's see some of the categories. Newspaper maps, imaginary maps, ethnography, title pages, art maps, composite maps, automobile maps, aerial photographs, climate maps, manuscripts, mountains and rivers, space maps. I mean, you want maps, this guy's got them. Genealogy maps. I've used this one quite a bit.
So you want me to tell you what the big deal about maps are?
Go for it. Fill in the blank.
That is how the intelligence services and I learned this in Nelson Rockefeller's book, Thy Will Be Done. So they sent out teams and teams and teams of people to map all over the world, because with these maps, you can find resources. There are certain fingerprints of areas that are more prone to gold, more prone to oil, more prone to uranium. The topography of the formations that house those resources can be found by mapping.
Well, these are both great resources this guy's provided, and I had a lot of fun.
Us and the intelligence agencies.
Exactly. Anyways, I thought it was worth sharing that website. Since we got a bunch of researchers who watched, there's a fun little tool.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And I think the Stanford connection, of course, I'm sure that stood out really quickly to you.
Even more amazing.
For those who don't know, Stanford is the West Coast hub of the CIA.
Yes.
Or their recruiting center there. Okay. That was one bonesman.
That's crazy.
Next guy we're going to talk to is a guy named David Hoadley Thorne, Thorne. Skull and Bones, class of 1966. And he's best known for becoming the U.S. ambassador to Italy from 2009 to 13. But there's more to him than just an ambassador. How did he get there? Well, he lived in Italy as a boy for about a decade because his father was there helping to administer the Marshall Plan.
Oh my gosh. Are you kidding me?
Nope.
And
again,
what
is the Marshall Plan? Yeah, go ahead.
So we can say it together. What did the Marshall Plan fund? Operation Gladio.
In Italy, and his dad was there.
Holy crap.
By the way, he's got a great grandfather you've heard of. None other than Skull and Bones alumni Henry L. Stimson.
Oh my gosh. Are you kidding me? So his grandfather is Stimson and his father is in Italy implementing Operation Gladio.
Uh-huh.
Oh, yeah, that's no big deal at all.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about David Thorne. He'd get his master's in journalism from Columbia University of 1971. He was in the U.S. Navy during Vietnam from 66 to 70. Before he got his master's in journalism. In 1971, he co-authors a article for Veterans Against the War with none other than his classmate at Skull and Bones, John Kerry. And the title of the paper was The New Soldier. It was anti-war activism. John Kerry would marry David's twin sister, Julia. Keeping it in the family? Okay.
What?
Yeah.
Wait a minute. Wait a minute. So, oh my God, you're blowing my mind. Okay, keep going.
So he becomes an activist. Is what he did.
Vietnam War with Kerry.
Yeah.
Holy shit.
Mm-hmm. So he gets out of the war, 71, 72, becomes a political consultant. He worked on John Kerry's first congressional campaign in 1972. He helped Joe Biden win his first Senate campaign in 1972. It's David Thorne for you. Worked on both of those campaigns.
So wait a minute. You're saying that a bonesman put Joe Biden in the Senate?
He helped.
I'm going to say he did, because nobody could help Joe Biden. Holy shit.
This guy's one hell of a Forrest Gump, isn't he?
Holy shit.
So he became a real estate developer, which he learned from his father. You know what his father did when he wasn't working with the Marshall Plan?
What?
He ran the Italian branch of Bankers Trust.
What?
Yep.
Oh my gosh. Holy crap.
We started to make some connections.
That's crazy.
Uh-huh.
Oh my gosh. Now I got to go back and check on that, because I bet that was part of the money laundering thing for the Vatican Bank. I'm almost sure it was.
It's got to be. I think that may have come up.
Oh my
Because I know
God.
we've talked about Bankers Trust a number of times.
Oh my gosh. Are you fucking kidding me? I'm sorry. I'm like having an aneurysm here. Go ahead. Keep going.
All right. So then he co-founded something called Advisor Investments. That's another real big player in wealth management. They specialize in Vanguard and Fidelity mutual funds and ETFs. It is a very big asset manager. I think they're above average at what they do. Obviously, they were a competitor to some degree. He left there in 2009. He would then become Secretary of State John Kerry's senior advisor. And his focus, this is a direct quote, his focus on integrating economic and commercial issues into U.S. foreign policy.
Which is what the whole CIA State Department's done for the last 100 years that I know of.
Bingo. And this guy's running point for John Kerry.
Holy moly. Oh, I got to put this guy's name on my list. Because this one goes way back. Oh my gosh. This is absolutely crazy.
He currently sits on the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. Why is that a big deal? Well, that's supposed to be a conservative lobbyist. And then he joins something called the American Ditchley Foundation. And I'm going to share something about the American Ditchley Foundation you're going to love.
Okay.
I'm going to blow this up a little bit because it's very small writing. Okay, what is the American Ditchley Foundation? It's established in 1958 to advance U.S. and U.K. understanding following World War II. Over time, that transatlantic purpose has expanded to a broader mission, promoting global understanding and dialogue among nations around the globe. Today, the American Ditchley Foundation works with the Ditchley Foundation in the UK and the Canadian Ditchley Foundation to bring together experts and leaders from a variety of fields to foster a better understanding of and solutions to issues of global concern. Through 10 to 12 conferences each year, generally hosted at the Ditchley Park, Pennsylvania, at Ditchley Park, a stately Oxfordshire manor. This is it right here.
Oh my gosh.
Very old money here. Ditchley advances dialogue on subjects of international importance. Conference participants benefit from Ditchley Park's grand beauty, yet relaxed atmosphere, which fosters warmth, intimacy, and a thoughtful approach to the problems facing our complex world today.
Yeah, that's what they need.
Yeah. There's so much. We could do a whole show on this Ditchley stuff. Their directors, I went through them. There weren't, some of these names are worth looking into, but there weren't any that just jumped off the page. But there's very old family money, and a lot of it's academia, exactly what you'd think. Like I said, we spent a lot of time on Ditchley. I didn't want to have time to go do deep dive, but here's one here. Dr. Kay Shannon, Chair, Council of Foreign Relations. Here's the Fort Morgan Stanley. Community Advocates Public Policy Institute. Oh, National Security Correspondents for the New York Times. American Enterprise Institute. London Stock Exchange Group. Yeah. I mean, this is a who's who. Yeah, basically, this is your Bilderberg group under another name. So that's what this guy is now, Thorne is now doing. He's on the American Ditchley Foundation.
And that's what I was trying to make the point last night on Alpha's show. The ones that you know about aren't even as evil as the ones you don't know about.
Yeah, and that's something that Catherine Austin Fitts said when she was on Tucker, and we've mentioned this before, but she's trying to follow the money too, and she thinks it's the money behind the Ivy League schools are the real power brokers, and these are not names that show up in the headlines. They stay in the shadows. At least some of them do. But this American Ditchley Foundation is basically it's an incubator of globalism, and this guy's got the perfect resume for it. So I think we're going to be seeing more of Ditchley.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to have to look into it.
We've got time for one more, I think. Skull and Bonesman, Frederick W. Smith. And I wish I pulled a picture of him because he is a fat, ugly bastard.
What's his name? Fredericks W. what?
Frederick W. Smith.
Smith.
You can pull a picture if you like. He was a Skull and Bones class of 1966, which means he's classmates with all these guys. Frederick Smith is famous because he was the founder of Federal Express, FedEx. That's this guy. He's born in Marks, Mississippi, of all places. But he came from money because his father is James Frederick Fred Smith, who's the founder of, if you're from the South, you know this, the Tuttle House restaurant chain.
Yeah.
And he's also, And do they have those in Florida?
No.
Okay. He's also the founder of something called the Smith Motor Coach Company, which you probably know by its new name. It's now called Dixie Greyhound Lines because Greyhound Corporation bought a controlling interest in 1931. So this guy comes from money. He was an amateur pilot as a teenager. And then he, when he goes to Yale, becomes friends with George W. Bush and, more importantly, John Kerry, because they had common flying interests. They would go fly their small planes on weekends. He goes to the Marines, and he's a Marine Corps pilot from 1966 to 1969. He was a forward air controller in Vietnam, and he flew the back seat of the OV-10. I got a Silver Star, a Bronze Star, and 2 Purple Hearts. This is very interesting to me because my mom's brother, who is an Annapolis graduate, was also a Marine pilot at those exact same years in Vietnam. And my father was an Air Force pilot in Vietnam the exact same time. And of course, we know that John McCain was a naval pilot back then. Gets out of Vietnam and he founds Federal Express to make it a logistics company. He had about a $4 million inheritance. So 1971. Took his $4 million and was able to raise $91 million in venture capital.
Sure.
Yeah, you don't do that without connections. I mean, I raise capital. That's what I do. And yeah, getting 91 million for a logistics company seems interesting, but it worked out for everyone.
So he gets out When did he get out of the military?
I have him at 69.
In 69. And then it says he bought controlling interest in an aircraft maintenance company, Arc Aviation, which also sold jets. And a year later, he is founding Federal Express and raises $91 million, said no one ever.
Okay. Well, it wasn't an instant success story, because there's a little blurb that I thought was funny. At one point, the company was running out of money, so he took the company's last $5,000 to Las Vegas and came back with $27,000 in blackjack winnings so they could pay their fuel bill. So
yeah, I've heard this. I've heard that story. I have a lot of friends that flew for FedEx.
Interesting.
I still don't believe that.
Yeah, this guy gets indicted in 1975 for forgery on loan documents. That lawsuit was brought by his two half-sisters. But, of course, he's found not guilty.
Of course.
The same night he got that indictment, he's involved in a fatal hit and run where a 54-year-old handyman was killed. All charges later dismissed.
So this guy, and anyway, keep going. I'm telling you that this guy, everything about him, because if you guys don't know this or not, UPS has a very weird story as well. If you go back and you look at their history, they end up with all the Flying Tiger aircraft, the DC-8s and stuff like that, because that's where I worked when I got off active duty and was going to school full time on my ROTC scholarship. Their history is very weird too. These cargo, and I told you guys that the airlines that they leased these aircraft with all flew for the CIA. All of them. I saw the documentation on the inside of the aircraft. And these cargo aircraft are the perfect disguise, if you will, for ferrying weapons and drugs everywhere under the guise of carrying cargo.
Oh, that wasn't his first fatal car accident. When he's at Yale, his car rolled and the passenger got killed. Of course, the causes of the crash were never determined.
Oh,
remember we said earlier about how Bongino and Cash can't find evidence of Epstein's suicide because nobody ever investigated it as a suicide? Thank you, Bill Barr. Same thing, of course. Of course, he determined the cause of the crash because you didn't want to investigate it because this guy was connected. Okay, fast forward. George Bush gets elected, and there was a lot of speculation that George Bush was going to make Smith the Secretary of Defense, but he chose Rumsfeld instead. When Bush ran against Kerry in 2004, he was kind of caught in the middle, but he endorsed Bush over Kerry. After Rumsfeld left, Bush offered him to be Secretary of Defense again, but he refused the offer because he wanted to be with his terminally ill daughter. He would reemerge in 2008 to become the co-chair of John McCain's presidential campaign, just to bring the whole loop back together. That's Fred Smith.
Oh my gosh. That's crazy.
Yeah, some fun stuff today, huh?
Yeah, and just as a reminder, Fred Smith would have known that John McCain, which most of us didn't know, I certainly didn't know until I started doing this research, was the chair of the International Republican Institute under the National Endowment for Democracy and was funding coups all over the world. He would have known that. Working for John McCain while he was running for president, who was also still serving as the chair for the IRI. While he was running for president, he was funding coups all over the world. And this guy supported him for president.
Yeah, and he's running one of the world's biggest logistics companies. Has FedEx ever used for any illicit activity?
I'm going to say that I know UPS was. So I'm going to say, given the beginning of FedEx, that was true too. And I'm going to also go out on a limb and speculate that he didn't just win money in Las Vegas, he was given money.
Fred Smith, who'd have thunk it? So big source today. What kind of, we got connections to China. We got, I mean, all from one little boarding school. We have 3 bonesmen all on the international stage. This guy was going to be the Secretary of Defense for George Bush right before 9/11. You know, how well connected do you have to even be offered that position? You know, so that's kind of a big deal. And think about this. He was, you know, they talked about, oh my goodness, Pete Hegseth's qualification. Yeah. This guy was a pilot in Vietnam for 3 years and then ran a logistics company. And he's supposed to be more and they're worried about Pete Hegseth's qualifications.
And killed people.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And I wouldn't be surprised if Smith did not want all of that dredged back up. And while they may have wanted him and assured him that they had the political clout to get him in because they knew he was compromised and would go along with 9/11, I would be willing to bet that he didn't want all of that stuff drummed up, which it likely would have at least been discovered. I'm sure they would have done a propaganda campaign to legitimize it, but
yeah, he definitely has some skeletons in his closet, which is an interesting thing to say from Skull and Bones.
I wasn't even going to touch that.
Yeah, well, back to our pirate theme. So some new threads to pull on today, and but I think everything we talked about today just re-emphasizes your and my entire theory of how the world really works. And
I agree.
One big club, and we ain't in it.
But we're figuring out what the club is.
Yeah, I think we got a pretty good idea at this point.
Yeah,
I should be good to go for next week.
Okay.
And
do you have anything coming up that you want to share with everybody?
We just started something should be really fun. We did episode 1. We're going through James Madison's notes on the Philadelphia Convention, where we do the Constitution, and the show we did yesterday, which is up on my channel. We talked about really what was leading up to the need to. They thought they were going there to amend the Articles of Confederation, but after about 2 months in sweaty convention hall in the middle of summer in Philadelphia, they've realized they're just going to have to rewrite the whole darn thing. And you can get in the heads of the founding fathers. It's not what they were trying to do, but what they were trying to avoid. What did they fear the government could become? And there's a great quote about the Constitution, and I think it was by Thomas Jefferson. No, it was by Madison himself. And he basically said the Constitution is there to protect people from the government. And so it really gives you an insight into what the founding fathers were trying to do and how badly off the rails this country has become as a result of not paying attention to those lessons.
So what's the name of your channel on Rumble, Brady?
Just look up WarHamster. There's a couple of them on there. The bigger one's the one you want to watch. I think it's War Space Hamster. I'm not sure. Okay. But yeah, and that's where I got a lot of that stuff for. It's called that series is called the Refederalist Report. And yeah, some good stuff on there.
Awesome. All right. Until next week.
Cheers, everyone.